Everybody. First, I just want to thank everybody for joining. My name is Chris Nihan. I'm president of EVready Energy. And look, if you're expecting this call to be like a normal call about EV charging, where someone's talking about the company's talking about having you buy EV charging stations, installing the charging stations, this is not that. This is not that call. This is a call about helping you guys save money, not spend money based on dynamic circumstances that are happening in Massachusetts. And it's not the funding that's available, although that is something that we know a little bit about. Just a little bit of a background about what the goal is for today. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about energy, and especially a unique energy circumstance in Massachusetts that you probably haven't heard too much about, that we're working with several of the auto manufacturers today to help solve that problem that they didn't necessarily take into account when they initiated their programs. And so we'll talk about what those issues are specifically in Massachusetts, the approach that we take in order to solve that problem. And that's going to be the next 30 minutes. So before I jump into about us, if anybody has any questions, don't hesitate to pause me and ask it, or because I'm sure other people are going to be thinking it. If you have a question, you can put it in the comment section. Al, if any of those pop up, if you don't mind just reading those off when they come up. And then again, like we are, one of the first things about us is that we're local. So I'll get to that in a second. And so we're local. What we're doing is extremely unique in the industry, and we're glad to come to your dealership, meet in person, and show you how we're doing this for other dealerships. So who are we to start? What's our mission? It's to mitigate the disruptive challenges of electrification and simplify the electrification projects and processes that are existing in the industry. Our entire company actually came from the EV charging space, where we saw all of these things within EV charging that were really negatively affecting end users. And the most negatively affected end user in the United States was car dealerships. So we decided to actually leave the formal charging space to start a company to focus on what we believe the industry isn't telling everybody about on day one necessarily. My background, I used to lead automotive for the largest charging company in the United States, and worked with several of the automotive manufacturers previously, still do today. So what's our core expertise? Like, what are the 3 factors that you should be aware of when you're working with us that we understand pretty well? Number 1, we know all the charging providers very well, whether that's a company that you like or a company that you don't like, or something that you know about what's going on, or a really interesting part of the industry that it's important to know. That's the space that we all came from. We also came from the utility space. That's going to be a heavy focus for this conversation today, is tied to the electric utility and how you're charged for electricity, especially in Massachusetts. And so we'll kind of explain that dynamic. And our team has come from the utility space in Massachusetts, and then automotive experience working with different automotive manufacturers across the United States, and really understanding the pressure they're putting you under and the best way to deal with them to minimize your total cost of ownership tied to any investments that you're being asked to make. And so this is kind of a summary of all of that experience. But what I'll lead to is today our team is working with several of the automotive manufacturers to solve this problem, where we're becoming like the approved vendor tied to the specific problem, so that dealerships have somewhere to go to solve it. And I'll explain what that is in just a second. But this is a good list of all of the automotive manufacturers that we're working with. We actually have a representative from General Motors that is going to be hopping on in a little bit. So what is the goal of this call? It is to discuss with you key energy considerations to be taken into account at your dealership. Now, what I'm going to do really quickly, just in case somebody has to hop off or whatever the case may be, within the chat, I'm going to put a link. If you don't mind clicking on that. I was on a podcast called Car Dealership Guy about a few months ago, talking about this problem. And several of the automotive manufacturers heard it and said, our dealers are shutting off their breakers because their electric bills are so high since they installed their charging stations. How do we solve this problem? This podcast is a really good representation of what that issue is. This issue is the worst in 3 states: New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and California. So what do I mean by that? So far in the programs that you've probably experienced so far tied to EV charging, an automotive manufacturer said, hey, you have to go install these charging stations. And if you don't, we're not going to deliver you cars. Here's the equipment that you have to buy or that we recommend that you buy. And we recommend that you, let me just add in here. Here's what we recommend that you use as your installer. Sometimes it was a requirement, sometimes it wasn't, but they would provide some type of a recommendation. And these 2 factors were the focus on what the cost of charging is at a car dealership. But the reality is the biggest costs are not tied to that. It's tied to how the charging stations are installed on the property with the electric utility. And I'm going to explain and show you an example of that in Massachusetts in just a second. And then the next piece, what is the maintenance profile of those chargers? How hard is it to fix them? I'm sure a lot of you on this call have had trouble with broken down charging stations. And how do you manage the chargers so they don't create adverse circumstances on your site that could be, potentially avoided? And then the last piece, at the end of the day, like, what does that do to your reputation as an EV dealer? All of, the way that you set the chargers up, the experience that people are having on site, whatever the case may be. Now, what I'm going to focus on, though, is the energy and OPEX piece on the left there. So in Massachusetts, we have 3 different types of utilities. You have National Grid, which is a utility, an investor-owned utility. You have Eversource, and then you have all of these different municipalities. There is one fee on your electric bill that, if you look at the bottom line there, depending on how many chargers you installed, if you're a Ford dealership, you're definitely in the higher position for these categories. You're at a significant risk of losing a ton of money, whether you're using the charging stations or not. And it's all dependent partially based on how they're installed, and then partially a little bit of how they're used. And then the other piece for everybody on the call is there is a program today in Massachusetts where the utility will pay you to not use electricity at certain times of the day. And the payout isn't $1,000 or $2,000. It's dependent, but there's an opportunity for car dealerships to make tens of thousands to over $100,000 or significantly more extra annually if their location is set up right and is participating in one of those programs that exists. But there's a bunch of challenges around it and complications. That's kind of where we come in and where we help. So that's the risk tied to this one line item, and I'm going to show everybody here what I mean, okay? So on the left is a car dealership's load, okay? Now, I just want to give this education really quickly. When you see your electric bill, like when you're at your house and you pay your electric bill, you pay per kilowatt hour. You pay for utilization. So it's like a hockey stick. It's like the more that you use, the more that you pay for. For commercial electric bills, while that does exist, there's another component of how you're charged for electricity that isn't utilization. It's for power. It's for force that is placed on the grid. And the way that the utility charges is your peak 15-minute interval for one single month. Okay. Why is that such a risk for EV charging versus all other loads that are at a car dealership? Take a look on the left here. So the light blue for this building, this dealership, is their building load. It's not utilization. It's not kilowatt hours. It's speed. It's force. It's kilowatts. What this is saying is that on the building load, that light blue bar is how much power they're using, how much power they were being charged for before charging. But because let's just say you're a Ford dealership, your building load was probably like 50 kilowatts, 70 kilowatts. Ford required that you install 550 kilowatts. So you might have 5 to 10x the amount of power that you're using at your location. And what that looks like on an energy graph for power is the majority of the power that's being used at this location that a customer is going to be billed for is tied to charging. Okay, so it doesn't matter how many times the chargers are used, as long as they're used for one peak 15-minute interval, you're going to get billed for that. And the way I wanted to represent that is this next chart here. That is a heat map. So left to right is time, and then top to bottom is dates. But what this is showing is that there was only 5 or 6 moments for 15 minutes during the month where the dealership used their chargers. So they didn't use them very much. They probably all private, all back of house, but they used them this amount of times. And it created this profile here where the power for charging was that dark blue, which was so high. And why is that such a big problem in Massachusetts? This is an electric bill in Massachusetts of a car dealership, where if you look at the red arrows here, they're under where you see transmission demand charge and you see distribution demand charge. Power is a demand charge, okay? So what this is saying is that $16,000 of the $18,780 delivery part of the bill for this dealer in Massachusetts was tied to measured demand. It was tied to excessive charging. And so a very small percentage of the kilowatt hours, it becomes much more expensive in Massachusetts unless that's managed. And every car dealership in Massachusetts is at risk of this today. So what is the outcome of that? Now, I won't get into too many details as to how we calculate this, but if unchecked, if you look at the typical EV charger payback, what you'll see is like just using these chargers a little bit can erase profitability around the cars that you're selling. It can make having chargers operational much more expensive than the cost of installing them in the first place, especially in Massachusetts. Well, I'll get to that to the next slide. So in terms of like an EVready customer, what we do is we help protect you from that circumstance in Massachusetts where your fees become incredibly excessive when they don't need to be. So what you may be thinking, these are the three things that we hear generally after I go over that. Well, we already have an energy guy. Your energy guy is focusing on supply. What we're talking about is delivery. So if you have an energy guy, great, that's awesome. Continue working with them, trying at the lowest supply cost you can possibly get. It has nothing to do with this problem, completely separate. The next thing, I think I'm on an EV rate tariff. You very well might be in Massachusetts. So the way it kind of works in Mass is this was such a big problem that they came out with an EV rate, but you can only get on the EV rate under certain circumstances, which I bet some of you have gotten under those circumstances. And the EV rate is dependent on load factor. You're probably thinking, well, what's load factor? Well, if you're not measuring and controlling load factor, there's 4 different rates under the EV rate in Massachusetts. And the worst rate just gets you back to where you started. And so if you're not measuring and controlling that, there's probably a good chance that your demand charge is just as bad as it would have been without an EV rate, and your kilowatt hour rate might even be a little bit higher. Last one, we rarely use the chargers. They aren't public. We don't even really get much inventory. That is the worst case scenario. Again, this isn't about how much the chargers are used. If you're sitting at your desk and one truck comes in with 7 cars, and then the tech takes them off the truck and plugs them all in, you're going to get hit with that demand charge, whether they're used zero more times in the month or 10,000 times in the month. And so that's the situation that you really want to protect yourself from. I think I just saw.
Hey, Chris, Janelle Ford is just asking, are these level 3 fast chargers you're predominantly speaking of, or level 2?
They're both, Janelle. They're both. Obviously, like with the fast chargers, like the fast chargers are more of a risk than the level 2 chargers. But like I'm going to give you the Ford example. For Ford, you still had to install. I know they lowered the program, but a lot of dealers installed 6 19.2 kilowatt ports. So that is like 120 kilowatts of power times Eversource's demand charge is $35. So 35 times 120 is that one line item just for the level 2 chargers, if in Eversource territory on an existing service, which we see all the time. And then the other piece, Janelle, that I would add is I know Ford required all of those NEMA plugs on the wall. If the dealers are plugging cars into those NEMA plugs, that's an even greater issue. That's another conversation, another problem. But thank you for asking. A lot of the charging providers are going to tell you that you can solve this problem and they have energy management capabilities. They do, and it can solve the problem a little bit, but it doesn't really do everything that a dealer needs. And I'll kind of explain that in a second. So how do we solve your problems? I think back in, like, let's call it 2000, it was okay to just kind of pay your electric bill, and that was that. But energy dynamics are becoming more complex. And I know it's probably hard to hear, like, oh, like, do we really need to put like in a management system to measure our energy? But more things are being electrified within a car dealership. The cost of electricity is increasing pretty dramatically. It hasn't happened in Massachusetts, but in like the middle of the country, there was an 833% rate increase for like 5 different states recently. There was another rate increase in another set of states that was like 22x to like increase capacity charges. So I say this to say that like in 2025 to 2030, especially in Massachusetts, where everything is so dynamic and there's not just risk, but there's also reward, it's really important to figure out how to measure your energy consumption, where it's coming from, then be able to manage it, understand how it impacts the electric bill. And if you do that the right way, you're going to be able to create new revenue streams for the dealership and protect the dealership from excessive fees. So what our solution, we call it Simplify. And there's really 3 components of Simplify. So think about the first piece is the strategy. It's essentially a live document that we update that provides feedback, not just related to how to set up your site, but how you can alter your charging or your energy circumstances to lower your cost of energy or to provide a better experience tied to charging. And there's definitely, like in Massachusetts, there are some dynamics today that I think everybody in the call should be taking into consideration. It's a more dynamic state than most states in the country. The next piece is, think about it like the implementation. It's our software. So essentially what we do is we take a piece of hardware, we plug it into your building so it reads the building load in real time. It pulses live meter data. And then the unique thing that EVready did that's pretty early in the market right now is we worked with all of the major charging software providers to integrate our software into all of the different providers' software. So whether you have 1 or you have 4, whatever the case may be, you can manage the power of all the charging stations together based on the live building load, with the goal of hiding measured demand within the building. And then the third piece is, I'm sure folks in the call have had station support issues, not just for charging, but for other devices on site. So our goal is kind of to be like your charging and charging and energy manager, and to provide oversight related to, state. I'll give you an example of recently. Station goes down, charging provider says, "Hey, you have to spend $6,000 on this new cable." And because our team came from the charging companies, we can kind of argue with support and say, no, this actually should be covered under the manufacturer, and this is why, and facilitate a replacement, and hopefully in some way maybe cover some of those costs economically for you as well, by just understanding the right questions with the manufacturer and how to represent you the best way possible. So these are tied to the playbook. These are the things that are like the primary focus in the playbook. Future charging needs, we have a calculator. I'm sure a lot of the dealerships right now are not looking to understand how many more chargers they need in the future right now, but we have a calculator for that. Utility rate tariffs. So in Massachusetts, what I can do is compare, okay, this is Eversource's G1 versus their G2 versus their G3. And if you do these things, this is how you get on one of these, or here's the EV rate. And if you were to set it up this way and then control load factor, this is the best rate you can get on. But essentially what we do is we oversee, we confirm what the best rate is for you at your site based on your circumstances, which is going to be different for a lot of different folks on this call. The next thing that we do is we provide like an analysis of the measured demand that we hid behind the building load, and then how much money that saved you. If there's any funding available, we can help you go after that as well. I think a lot of companies go after funding in Massachusetts. I think what's unique about us is we kind of know how to manipulate the funding a little bit to make you eligible, even if you aren't eligible in many cases. Battery energy storage. This is going to be a component of car dealerships in the next 5 years. And in different states, so it'll work at different speeds, but we built a calculator to tell you, hey, if you do this in Massachusetts, this is what your payback would be. And sometimes the answer is it doesn't make sense right now, and that's okay. Other times it does, but we'll be able to provide that feedback. public DC fast. I'm not saying you want to make your location a fast charging location. I've heard the argument for sure of why would we do that if we didn't do that for gas cars? But if that was a revenue stream to consider, we have a payback model to show you what your risk and what your reward would be. And then we have a demand response calculator that will help you understand, hey, if you don't use power at certain times of the day, this is how much you can get paid for it. Side to the software, I have focused heavily on charging, but I just want to make it clear. This is for charging. This is for solar. This is for lighting. This is for HVAC. This is for battery storage. And then taking all of those ingredients together and making sure that they're working together optimally. The reason we focus on charging is because it's the biggest no-brainer solution problem that you can solve at a low cost in Massachusetts today. But the software itself will help your site progress as the years go on. And again, our goal is to review your data. And again, like, because charging is a load that can be shifted or altered without affecting the business very much at all. And so our goal is to, first, we can lower your supply costs. I didn't focus on that today, but we want to lessen your demand at your site tied to EV charging. So the cost of charging isn't 85% of your delivery charges. And we want to do it in a way where we're maximizing the output of the charging station, as opposed to just limiting the power all day long to just making it a less viable charging station, which is what the software would do. And the last piece, if you're getting sick and tired of dealing with station support issues, or you're concerned that you don't have the expertise within the organization to manage the energy and the energy circumstances, our third piece, Manage, we take care of and handle that for you. So what I'm going to do is, like, if this is of interest to somebody, I'm just going to put the scheduling link in the webinar. And then I just want Chris Holyfield, I think I saw that you joined the call. Would you want to just make a couple quick comments as it relates to how we work together?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yes. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for the invite. Yeah. So I basically cover the infrastructure program for General Motors. And so roughly, as you know, our network is about 4,000 dealers strong. And I think, as with everybody else, we just gave the dealers the initiative. Hey, here's the requirements. Here's the vendors, go out and do the installation. And I think as we learned, we realized that, one, we didn't really consult with a lot of the utility companies, and they played such an integral part to the installation process. And two, we really didn't give the dealers the education on energy management, demand charges, because I think we just, as an OEM, didn't really understand that. So having said that, if I were to do the process over again, I would say this program right here would have been the education piece to give the dealers the guidance when it comes to how do you want to turn around and do it? What is your current setup like? And what are ways that we can do the installation and be cost effective, but also make sure that we give the dealers the education to make it. And then last, at the very end of the piece, as dealers started to move beyond just meeting their charger requirements and charging just for their fleet, is how do you monetize when it comes to public charging and offerings, and then also to battery storage and solar panels? How do you have that conversation, incorporate that into your business infrastructure and charging requirements? This right here program, I'm wholeheartedly engaged with and trying to give the dealers now this education that they lack, so we can help the dealers make better business decisions and simplify that decision point to a return on investment, instead of all of the other kilowatts and all of those things right there that is kind of outside of the dealer scope. But from a dealer perspective, they understand return on investment. So having said that, we're in the pilot stages now of, working with certain dealerships and then expanding that to multi-dealer groups. But hopefully, I'm thinking 2026, look to spread this as a nationwide step as to giving dealers guidance on further installations and, revenue opportunities when it comes to offering their charging infrastructure as public-facing and public charging. So again, thanks, Chris, for that chance to have this touch point and to add that clarity to it.
No, thank you. Appreciate it. Well, yeah, if anybody has any questions, don't hesitate to reach out, and we can absolutely, we can go over this. I think especially in Massachusetts, once dealers realize kind of what's going on, there will be a pretty heavy adoption for some type of a solution to solve this problem. And I appreciate everybody that joined for kind of hearing it first time out with Mass State Dealers Association. And Bob, thank you so much for scheduling this.
Yeah, thank you for doing this. Appreciate it. And as always, if dealers have need of further questioning, you've got all the contact info here, and we get it to you. If you need, just call me or email me, and appreciate you doing all this. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
We'll see you.